This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Monday, October 2nd, 2017. My guest is Sascha Segan of PCMag. Hi, Sascha. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I know it's a busy week for a lot of people. Are you traveling to San Francisco for the event on Wednesday?
Yes, I'm going to be at the Google event on Wednesday morning, and I am looking forward to, it sounds like it's going to be a lot of products.
Yeah, me too. I'll be there. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. It's been a while. I think the last time was Mobile Congress. It's funny, we do definitely see each other at Mobile Congress. And then the random occasional event like that Qualcomm Snapdragon event last fall, whenever that was. I can't remember.
Yeah, I haven't been traveling to events a lot recently. I've had a lot of big features and kind of exclusives that I've been working on instead. So we have a big enough staff here that we can send different people to different things.
But you're excited about the Google thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
this is a good one, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just about the Pixels is the thing.
Right.
It's this entire Google hardware line and how that's going to respond to Amazon and how it's going to respond to Microsoft and to Apple. And like there's all of these players that Google is going to be essentially speaking to with this big event.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is why I'm excited. Obviously, you know, I get invited to these things primarily because I have a weekly podcast now that I talk about phones a lot on the podcast, but I know that I'm, like you, very much interested in how this plays as an ecosystem play in addition to the devices, because, you know, a bunch of news items we saw this week. Amazon launched a whole bunch of new Echo products. Seems a little chaotic to me, this lineup, but, what's your take on that real quick?
Amazon just wants to make sure that it maintains its dominance in this home assistant space. And what it did is, I don't really consider it to be chaotic. I consider it to be filling in the lineup to make sure that everywhere from basically $50 to $250, there is an Amazon home assistant that you want. And the one space they leave open is the high end. And I find this strategic from their point to basically crush Google and Microsoft, but leave some room open for Sonos and Apple and the more high end, more luxury brands.
I think that's a very interesting take, and I agree with you. I think that what I meant by chaotic really here is that they just like, if you don't do what we do, which is analyze what happened, it seems like just a random assortment of things. It isn't, right? Obviously. And you're right. There's something there for everyone. I'm just a little surprised that the new Echo with the Zigbee built in, the Echo Plus or whatever it's called, is the same form factor as the old Echo. Like, that seems a little odd. If I were them, since they made a new Echo, regular Echo that I think is lovely compared to the original, I would have liked them to do a new design on this Plus model. And then, of course, I have Echo Dots. That's what I buy. And I think you're right. There's a strategy here where Amazon's always been very strong, which is kind of pretty much give away the hardware for free and, leverage the income from the service, right? Mm-hmm. From the sales of product. I really only use my Dots for controlling home appliances like IoT devices, but I don't really use them for queries or because I use a Google Assistant for that. So I'm feeling like I'm splitting myself up into two worlds, and I'm really hoping, honestly, with the Google announcement that they're going to make a cheap device that I can still use for home automation, but that speaks Google Assistant, because that's when I'm interested to be in ecosystem-wise.
And there's a very strong rumor out there, and there have been photos of something called a Google Home Mini, which is $49 and looks like a little fabric-covered egg, and is that Google response to the Echo Dot. The question that I have for Google that I'm going to have to see them respond to on the stage is to make sure that they have the smart home partners to match Amazon, because that's where they've been behind.
And you're right. And that's why I'm using an Echo Dot in both my homes to control my appliances, because most of them actually have Zigbee. I have an Almond Plus router in both places that has built-in Zigbee and Z-Wave. And, it works with Alexa really well. And so I can tell to turn off lights, and that's really most of what I do is turn it on and off lights and outlets that I have various things plugged into. And I would love to see Google do that properly, because then I could actually have one single device or AI, as it were, assistant to talk to, because I do use Google Assistant a lot on my phones. And I wish I could kind of integrate the two.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So we'll
It's
see.
interesting to me how Google Assistant has not played as well with others as Alexa has, especially when you think of Google, you think the open ecosystem, right?
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think that's changing. And I think let's talk about that, because I think that this Pixel event, is in last year's, in a way, headed in that direction of Google wanting to be more vertically integrated and kind of controlling their ecosystem more. So what are we expecting? Let's start from the top. 2 phones, I think, maybe a Google Home Mini, as you said, and then there's rumors of a Pixel laptop or Pixel Book 2-in-1.
Yeah, fancy Chromebook, basically.
Correct. So what do you know of them? I mean, there are rumors, but they're pretty solid rumors right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, Evan Blass just about 10 minutes ago blasted out some more photos of the Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL.
I saw, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like when Evan's doing that, the game is pretty much up.
It's done, right?
Yeah.
So what we're looking at are 2 phones, 2 sizes, but unlike last year, they're not 2 different, not one scaled version of the other. They're, the smaller one, the Pixel 2, is basically made by HTC and is an evolution of the design from last year with lots of bezels top and bottom. We're hearing that it's losing the headphone jack and gating stereo front-facing speakers.
Mm-hmm.
There is rumors of OIS on the camera. Mm-hmm. And then the bigger one is made by LG and has all of that, including the loss of headphone jack, but it has a kind of almost full front display, which is probably a variation on the V30, which is a really lovely phone.
Yeah, I think it's based on the V30 chassis, but one of the things that I found interesting is that they're not doing the dual cameras.
Yeah, no, they're not. And they're removing the headphone jack, which, as we know, on the V30 with that quad DAC, for those of us who care and are audiophiles and really, really love using a variety of wired 3.5 millimeter devices, this is a big loss. I use the Pixel headphone jack on my Pixel in my car all the time. I have an older car. I just have auxiliary. I'm very happy with it. It's a really great sounding system and it's my little Porsche convertible. And I don't really care about changing my head unit and getting Bluetooth and all that. I just want a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. So I guess I'm going to have to use an adapter, and that's unfortunate, but I guess it'll have to do. It'll be interesting. I think for me, it's going to be the Pixel 2 XL, the bigger one that I want, because I cannot anymore live with a phone that's just, it doesn't have this super widescreen aspect ratio. Once I switched over to that with the G6 and then the Samsungs, including most recently the Note 8 and now the V30, I'm jonesing for that from Google on a Pixel. How do you feel about it?
I mean, as you know, I love the tall, narrow phones because for years I've been ranting about how phones should be narrower so they can be more easily used in one hand. Because for people with a range of hand sizes, I feel like there was a point at which the phones essentially got too wide, which in my mind is wider than about 2.8, 2.9 inches to be used in one hand. And so now we're seeing the phones get stretched so that you have that screen real estate, but you can also comfortably reach across the screen with a range of thumb sizes. And that's one of the reasons I so love the Galaxy S8, which is my phone of the year right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's the size of that phone for the screen real estate is kind of almost a perfect match, right? And I mean, I'm personally prefer the bigger ones because I'm used to a bigger phone in my hand anyway, and so I'm willing to even get more screen real estate. But I totally say I think most people, the Galaxy S8, regular S8, is kind of the perfect storm of size versus, like, physical size versus screen size. And so it's too bad that the small Pixel is not going to get that.
Well, and then what's really interesting me about the Pixel rumors is some of the crazier rumors that are out there that are not the ones that are a little crazy but can't totally be discounted. For instance, we've been hearing that the small one is going to have HTC EdgeSense, which is not crazy. But then you see rumors that the large one will also have edge sense, and
I
that's
don't think
kind of
either
crazy.
of them will.
You
I
don't
really
think either
don't
of them
think.
will?
No, I think HTC wants to keep that for themselves, and I don't see Google caring too much. Honestly, double click the power button for the camera has worked really well on the Pixel for months now, and it's one of the fastest implementation of an instant on camera on any device. It's faster than even the Galaxy S8. So I think. I don't see why we'd need anything else. Maybe a long press of the power button instead of, offering the power shutdown options can just bring up Assistant or something.
Well, I'm actually pretty sure that EdgeSense is one of the things that Google just bought from HTC.
You think so, huh?
Yeah, because when they spent that $1.1 billion to perplexingly buy 1,000 HTC employees at the rate of, what is that, $1 million per employee or something? One of the things that was part of that agreement was a non-exclusive license to HTC software technologies. And that tells me that things like EdgeSense are something that Google felt some value
but that might
in.
not happen to next year at this point. I mean, maybe these phones were committed a while ago. And you're right. I'm more likely to believe that we'll see it on the regular Pixel 2. And not on the Pixel 2 XL, simply because who manufactured them. And, I had this discussion last week with Matt Swider of TechRadar about the whole Google HTC acquisition thing. And really, it's kind of baffling to me from a PR perspective that they would announce this partnership a week before or 10 days, whatever it was, before this Pixel event where the flagship Pixel, the Pixel 2 XL, will be made by LG. And might not have the squeeze feature. It's weird to me. I would have waited till after that to do that announcement. I don't know. I mean, I'm excited about it.
I don't know. I would have waited till January. Get out of the whole release cycle entirely.
Exactly. And honestly, look, I love HTC. I think the U11 was a good phone this year. But I feel like the best Pixels not Pixels, there's never been one, but the best Nexuses for me have been, other than the Huawei 6P, have been the 5, really, and and before that the 4, and they were made by LG. And part of it was because they weren't that well made, but they were made at a price point, and that's probably why they weren't that well made. But overall, they brought us a really compelling package, especially the 5. I mean, you look at the 5 today, if you pull out your old 5, if you have one, and it's so bezel-less compared to, compared to the Pixel last year. It's amazing. And it was a delightful device at its time. It did everything right. It was fast. I don't know. I really liked that phone. And so I'm really excited about the Pixel 2 XL being made by LG for some reason. Yet next year, what are we going to get? Like, HTC needs to go full screen, full widescreen, skinny, tall, like the others. And we haven't seen any sign of that happening. I hope that they can strike a deal with either Samsung or LG for those displays, because that's the problem, right? HTC doesn't have the best displays because they don't have the quantities.
Well, the question is when, and I was discussing this with some LG execs maybe 6 months ago, when the new OLED fabs come online, because the crisis in the industry right now is that there is a severe shortage of OLED fabrication plants, and that they're all run by either Samsung or LG. And there is essentially a line out the door of people who want OLEDs. And about 6 months ago, I think the LG folks were saying it was going to be another even 18 months before the new fabs come online. I don't know. I don't know if you've heard more details about this, but it's going to be a choke point until those factories get up and running.
Yeah, especially with Apple launching the iPhone 10 that has an OLED display manufactured by Samsung. So
I've heard Apple is paying Samsung a hilarious premium for those displays.
Of course they are. And they have to. I mean, Samsung would be stupid not to work out a deal like that. But look, you're right. There's going to be a shortage. And so to me, I'm just saying that we know roughly what to expect on Wednesday. But the future, combined with this announcement of HTC last week, I have no doubt we'll see a full size, full height display, but it's still going to be pretty tight in terms of production. Like, I know Google's goals here are to, become a relatively big player in the smartphone game with a Pixel line. And
are they though?
Well, maybe. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the feeling I always got from them since last year. They haven't achieved that in any way, shape, or form. I've seen so few Pixels in the wild, but I do see them, and it's interesting that I don't see them necessarily with tech people.
See,
so,
Google still has the circle it can't square of being the provider of Android for all of these other manufacturers. And they still need to make sure that the other manufacturers who are using Android don't feel threatened enough to do an Amazon. And so if Google becomes too much of a hardware powerhouse, too much of a threat, I don't think we're going to see, a Samsung go full Tizen. But if you look at Amazon as a model, they've taken the AOSP platform and they've snapped away all the Google services. And they've said, use our services instead. And when I've talked to Samsung people recently, they have been very high on Samsung as a services platform. And now they're the only ones who are, none of the rest of us take Samsung services overwhelmingly seriously. But you can see a world where if Samsung feels too threatened by Google, there goes Chrome. It's the Samsung browser. There goes Google Assistant. It's Bixby. There goes, Google Search. It's some kind of arrangement with Bing.
But I'm sorry to tell you that wouldn't fly because a lot of people in the West use Google services and they want them, and they don't want them on Tizen.
Well, what I'm saying,
and Google won't let them happen on Tizen, like they don't let them happen on Chinese phones.
No, I'm saying it would be a version of AOSP.
Yeah, but that doesn't work for Amazon. Nobody buys Amazon tablets.
Tons of people buy Amazon tablets. Amazon tablets are hugely popular.
Not to do anything but watch videos.
Yes.
And read books. They don't do their email on those. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I have an Amazon tablet. Of course I do, because they're super cheap. They're like a commodity. Right. I can throw it out the window and not care. But would it be my main Android device ever? No. And look at what debacle it was when they tried to make a phone. There are many reasons why that phone was a debacle, but in big part to me was because, consumers in the US, the people who go to Verizon, AT&T stores to buy a phone and don't want to buy an iPhone for whatever reason, or don't have the budget or want something mid-range, they saw that phone and they said, I can't do my Google stuff on it. Forget it.
No, I
can guarantee you that's a huge part of it.
You make a really good point, but I still don't think that Google wants to force Samsung into making that decision. I don't think Google wants to see what would happen if Samsung considers them an enemy. And for Samsung not to consider them an enemy, they need to mysteriously not sell more than a certain number of pixels.
I agree. But I also do agree that, look, Samsung and Google depend on each other hugely for the Western market. Absolutely do. Like, Samsung makes the best hardware by far, right?
Yes.
Like, absolutely nails it. And their software isn't that bad. Like, I'm not talking about their services. I'm talking about their slightly customized version of Android. It's getting better. This year is the first Android phone. When I reviewed it for ChipChick, the S8 and S8 Plus, I wrote that. I said I didn't feel like throwing it against the wall in the first hour I used it, because I could actually feel like I could live with the launcher. And I wasn't angry at the phone. It didn't piss me off to the point where I was like, Google Play Now, Google Now launcher, right? Right away. I did it eventually just because habit. But it was a good experience. It's a good experience even without the Samsung apps, which is like awesome. And that tells me that Google needs Samsung as much as Samsung needs Google at this point, because Google makes the best Android. Obviously, they make Android.
Yeah.
And then Samsung's devices only shine because they have Android. Because remember, all the hardware in the world does not make a good phone. Because look, Apple for the longest time was behind everyone. I'm sorry to say, but they were. Until the iPhone 10, there wasn't a compelling iPhone, technologically speaking, since the 5S, where they finally introduced a fingerprint reader that worked where nobody else was able to do it until then. And before that, the 4 with Retina, and the fact that it had a really, really gorgeous industrial design. And it brought this idea of jewelry-like phones, right? Which we now take for granted, that even mid-range phones are jewelry-like now. And so my point is that Apple never succeeded because they had the best hardware. Well, maybe a couple of times they had the best hardware. So it's nice to see them come in with the iPhone 10 that's really competitive in terms of hardware. But at the same time, Samsung can throw all the best hardware in the world out there. If they don't have Google to pin that down into a user experience that's half decent, they're screwed.
So Samsung needs Google, Google needs Samsung,
Correct.
and the result, I think, is going to be that Google produces compelling pixels and once again does not market them quite as hard as they could.
I agree, but I think that they say that they want to. Like, see what I'm saying? Like, I think the words at Google don't match the actions. The words are, we want the pixels to be successful, blah, blah, blah. But then the action is, we're not making enough. We're not selling enough. We're not marketing enough.
Exactly. And they're going to be like, do you think that they're going to do the exclusive carrier sales partnership with Verizon again?
Yeah.
Because that is a great way. That is a great way to make sure you sell some phones, but not too many. I mean, it's not Sprint, in which case you would sell no phones. But
Correct.
It's Verizon, so you'll sell some phones, but you're not going to threaten the Galaxy S8 landscape.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's fair. And honestly, I can live with that because, as you said, the S8 is a phenomenal phone, and it's probably the best phone for most people that want an Android phone today. And that's the thing, and I brought that up with Matt last week. It's like there's a lot of big open questions with this HTC Google thing because do you reasonably see whatever is left of HTC making another phone? Like, they're barely succeeding when I make a good phone like the HTC 10 or the U11 selling almost any. Are they going to continue making their own phones, or are they just going to throw the cap and go, forget it, we're done?
They say they're going to keep making their own phones.
Yeah, of course they do, because they would be suicidal not to.
But I really see HTC's future in being a design and manufacturing house for these other brands that want to enter consumer electronics. Things like Valve with the Vive, like Under Armour with the health stuff. They need to match up with various other brands and produce brilliant products for those brands that aren't necessarily phones. It's kind of like, this just popped into my head, but it's kind of like what Bullet Group is doing in phones, but better and for everything else.
Correct. And you know what? I agree with you, and I think that's why I'm worried we're never going to see another HTC flagship again.
I think it's possible. I mean, the U11 was almost certainly the most underrated, unnoticed phone of the year.
Absolutely, and it's one of the best.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. It was well implemented. After they shook some of the initial software bugs out, it worked fine, but it was basically impossible to find in the United States. And it was technically being sold in the United States. We're not talking about a Huawei here, okay? It was technically being sold here, and yet nobody was selling it.
But I think it's the same as Essential, right? Sprint was the main carrier with it. Right, and that means instantly zero market share.
Yeah. No, you're right about that.
Like, every time I see a phone being an exclusive on Sprint, I just cringe.
I know, and you think all the way back to Palm,
Right. Well, that was the big. I wouldn't even say that was the beginning. I think that was the example that really gelled that Sprint was a mess, and they still have been a mess since then. Which will bring us to another topic later, which is T-Mobile and Sprint.
Yeah.
Sitting in a tree. But that scares me to death as a T-Mobile customer, and I know you're also against the idea. But let's talk about that some more later. What I want to get back to is quickly, if you had to, first of all, are you using a Pixel as a daily driver, or are you more like, you change phones all the time, you never keep one long enough? Like, what's your take on that?
I mean, my primary phone over the past several months has been Ness 8. I swapped out for various iPhones over the past 2 months or so because I tend to go through an iPhone season of the year when there are new iPhones.
Of course.
And I have just in the past couple of days reset back from the iPhone 8 to the Galaxy S8.
Okay, but did you use a Pixel for any length of time?
No, I'm not a big Pixel person.
So you reviewed it, but you didn't make it your primary phone. So you see, I make the Nexus and the Pixel my primary phone every year. Somehow, I feel like I want Google's pure Android experience, and I'm rarely disappointed, to be honest with you. And so I have the XL because I like more screen real estate. For me, the 2 XL, if I get one, when I get one, will be obviously my daily driver from the next year, probably, despite the lack of headphone jack, which I will rant about, I'm sure, many times. But so that's why I'm kind of really invested in this event coming up on Wednesday. And I'm a Chromebook user too, so I want to be very clear about this. I primarily use a Mac, and I do have some PCs. I just got a Windows 10 laptop, the Surface laptop from Microsoft to review, and I have to say, this is the first, and I've used quite a few Windows 10 PCs recently. I've had some Asus review units, some Dell ones. They've all been very good. The Windows 10 PCs in the last year or two that I've reviewed have been really solid, most of them. Good user experience out of the box.
Absolutely.
Kudos to Microsoft and those OEMs. But I have to say there's always been some niggles, like my Dell Inspiron 13 2-in-1 review unit wouldn't go to sleep properly, or it would, but then it wouldn't wake up properly. And the trackpad needed it was good, but certainly better than many other Windows laptops, but it was not perfectly as good as a Chromebook or a Mac felt to me. But the Surface laptop is the first computer that I unboxed, set up, and felt like I was using a fully integrated solution from top to bottom, like a Mac product. It is absolutely phenomenal. And the last time I did a Surface was the Surface 3 Pro that I own, and that didn't feel quite as polished. There was a lot of issues.
See, I'm crazy.
Driver problems and stuff.
I am crazy about my Surface Book. I am talking to you right now on my Surface Book, and yes, it's an expensive high-end product, but I can do that. And the keyboard is delightful. The screen is gorgeous. The ports are adequate. Performance is good. And I actually use the detachable top half tablet pen thing to take notes with.
Oh, very good. I would never need that, but I appreciate that you do. All I'm pointing out to you is that I felt like a revolution came out of Redmond with the Surface laptop for me.
Just this
finally having
this year, this generation with the Surface Book and the Surface laptop, I think that they are just absolutely spot on.
I was like, I think I can put my MacBook aside for a while and be fine with this, perfectly like it is right now. It's perfect. It's fine. It's good. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are some niggles. I'm a USB-C person. I live in a USB-C world because of my MacBooks and my Android phones, and so no USB ports of any ports of any kind on this laptop is kind of mind-boggling to me, and kind of I don't get it. But I hope they turn around on that. It's weird that Microsoft, as such a big company, isn't going with USB-C all out right now. But it'll happen. I'm sure it's only a matter of time. So that's as an aside, this review that I got, I'm really enjoying it. I have to say, it's like, wow, really, really well done, Microsoft. Like, there is something to be said about this highly tight integration of hardware and software.
No, actually,
and that's why I use a Pixel every year, because it really feels so polished.
So when we talk about the Pixels, and when we talk about, is Google going to take over? Is Google going to become the Apple and kill Samsung and LG and all the OEMs, and everyone's so afraid of that?
It won't.
Why?
That's not happening.
No, but I'm going to say, why is that phrased in that way when no one is worried about Microsoft's excellent laptops killing HP and Lenovo and Dell? Why is everyone, why does the phone world always talk in this sort of this has to kill that way, where in the laptop world, it seems like a lot of different OEM players can really coexist?
I think it's because it's arguable that there is not quite the same kind of inflection point in the laptop world in the last 20 years that there has been with the iPhone in the last 20 years in the mobile world, right? The iPhone really is an inflection point. It's really the transition. And since then, everybody's been trying to pursue that holy grail of killing the iPhone. I mean, at least that's the story that's being weaved by us journalists and the public. I'm not weaving that story myself, but I think that I wouldn't be lying to say that it's somewhat true. And so it's kind of BS. But look, the reality is this. I think, to me, if I look at, the reason Pixel is not killing, Samsung and LG and HTC and all these others, and the same reason that Surface is not killing HP and Dell and Asus is because you can buy a pretty damn decent Dell XPS 13 for less than, $800, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you cannot buy a Surface, an equivalent Surface laptop for less than $1,100.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different price point, right? Like the Pixel is also you can get a OnePlus 5, which is a very great phone for the money. And, you don't have that, in the Apple world. Apple there's no licensing, so you're not going to get that.
Now, that said, one of the things I think is really interesting this year with Apple is I was looking at their lineup, and the 8 and 8 Plus being so incremental, at least in user experience. I feel like the A11 processor is transformational, but nothing is.
Oh, it is, absolutely.
Nothing's taking advantage of it yet. Nothing's going to take advantage of it for a year. But the fact that the iPhone 7 is now $549 is a great buy.
Is it that cheap?
Yeah.
I thought that was a success.
No, they knocked the 7 down to $549, and I think that is an amazing sweet spot for an iPhone right now.
It is pretty good, yeah. You get a lot of hardware for your money.
Exactly.
But I think, look, what I'm trying to get to is that Pixel and Surface don't play to the low end. Well, Nexus used to, but it doesn't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Pixel doesn't anymore, and they're certainly trying to be perceived as a premium brand, just like Galaxy S and Galaxy Note are. But there's lots of cheap Galaxies. Remember that. We never review them, but they exist.
Oh, we review them.
Well, you do, but I'm saying, those of us who don't have the resources of PCMag don't really have a chance to review them because we just don't have the manpower to do it. And
also, frankly, down at the low end, since we review a lot of low-end phones, down at the low end, the best is not always a Samsung.
Moto E4 is the best low-end phone, or low-end to me anyway, that I've used.
We have been finding, absolutely, we like the Moto E4, we like the Moto G5, and in certain niches, we like those big ZTE phablets on Cricket.
Yeah, they're good, huh?
Yeah.
I agree. Like, I every now and then ask for low-end or mid-lower, mid-end review unit from one of these prepaid carriers. The most recent one I got was like an LG X-Force or something. Like, it was about a year ago, I guess now.
Maybe the X-Power, the one with the really big battery.
X-Power or something? Yeah, X-Power.
Yeah.
That thing was, I was like, I think I could live with this. It's not gonna make me jump up and down with joy, but I'm not frustrated using it. It's perfectly serviceable. Yeah. I do have to say though that the E4 struck a chord because it felt like it's so close to a Pixel experience, that very light Moto skin. I was like, I can't believe that this is $80 on Verizon.
Yeah, those low-end Motos are so clean.
And I'm getting 90% of what I'm getting on a Pixel here. 90% in everyday use.
Yeah, they are so clean. I love those low-end Motorola's. The only real downside with them is the cameras.
Of course, you're not going to get the level of performance.
Right.
But you know what? If you think about it, the camera on the E4 is probably the same as your Galaxy camera was on the S5. And that's, it's probably, it's serviceable. If you know what you're doing, like you and I, you can use it to make decent photos. It's not going to be, and it's not like the Pixel where every photo you take is just like, wow, okay? We're spoiled. Like in the last 2 years, camera imaging on phones has just really taken a huge step forward, right?
It was really funny to try to compare the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 8 because we were looking at the two generations, and it's just a case of we're kind of plateauing. At least in decent light, the images are getting to be about as good as they're going to get. Yeah.
And I think low light is where the battle is.
Yeah.
The software improvement, like the computational photography, HDR plus or whatever Google calls it, and like HDR has become so good on phones in the last 2 years. The ability to, extract more dynamic range out of sensors through, computational photography has been tremendous. And I think, what Apple's doing with portrait mode is still imperfect, but it's still leading the way as to where we're going with this. And, this what we're seeing with Face ID, this, basically miniaturizing Connect, sticking it in your phone. And we'll eventually see that in rear cameras because Qualcomm's already announced that they have support for that in their future ISPs.
Yep.
We're going to see that coming, and it's going to change the way we take photos radically because autofocus is instantaneous on these things, right? You're tapping on the screen, and it knows exactly the depth of what you're tapping on because it can see the dots. And then it sets the focus right there instantaneously. You now basically the only delay is, and it's microseconds at this point, is the lens moving with the little coil, and it's so fast these days.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I've been telling people I'm very excited for basically the iPhone 9 and 11 much more than the iPhone 8 and 10 is the possibility of them going to this Qualcomm Spectra-like arrangement where they get that dot projector that's currently on the front of the iPhone 10 and they put it on the back, and then they are doing this live 3D imaging of everything, and the photos get better and the augmented reality experience just goes through the roof.
Yeah, and so I think that's true. I think we're going to see a bunch of phones next year with up to 3 sensors in the back. And I'm not talking about, one sensor could be this entire infrared projection array thing, Connect type thing that we saw on the iPhone. And then, they could still be like a telephoto or a wide angle or a monochrome and a main camera, or even a monochrome and a telephoto and a main camera and the array. I mean, it could get really interesting. And all the, those new processors are all going to support that. And I think it's going to be interesting. And I think it's also going to be interesting to see what the competing ISPs and competing chipsets are going to do. Specifically, I'm thinking right now of the week after next. The next week, since we're now the week of the Pixel. So the weekend after, I think it's the 16th, we're going to find out about the Mate 10. And there's a bunch of rumors about that. They have this new processor, the Kirin 960 in there that has like a bunch of, dedicated co-processors for AI and neural nets and pattern matching and all that stuff, right? So they could potentially use that for some camera wizardry as well.
Yeah, Apple has put that neural net processor into the A11, of course, and they're saying that it is largely for augmented reality, but also for scene recognition, and it'll improve camera performance through better scene recognition and basically the phone understanding what it's looking at and being able to tune the camera settings to the type of object you're looking at.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, AR is going to benefit, but lots of other things are going to benefit. Right now, there's a lot of stuff when you're doing image searches and pattern matching on these images, like a lot of this happens in the cloud right now. You're asking Google and Google Photos, find me all the pictures that I took in the last month that have dogs in them. And it does that, but it's already categorized in the cloud. Imagine your phone being able to do this offline, right?
Apple says that's what they're going to do. Apple says that
a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that Google
Face
does in the
ID
cloud
needs to be secure. Face ID can't send data to the cloud. It needs to all stay in the enclave. So that's how they use this processor for all this kind of neural net pattern matching stuff.
So what do you think Huawei's going to use it for?
I think right now it's going to be, because it's Huawei, a lot of talk and very little action. We're going to see a lot of marketing around it. But I think they might use it for photography. But I think mostly what they're going to do with it is, I'd say obviously AR, because AR core is going to be a thing this past year. They're just preparing. They're just putting this stuff in there, like you said with the A11 Bionic, weird name, but with the A11, it's for the future. But they're going to market it somehow by saying the phone is, right now they're using some sort of machine learning on their existing phones for garbage collection, for cleaning up and organizing the storage data, right? So that it doesn't have one of the common problems of Android is that if you don't do a factory reset of your phone every year or so, your phone starts to slow down in accessing data because things get fragmented and scattered. I don't know the technical details. I'm sure some of you here will know what I'm talking about, but this is a known thing, and Google has worked hard to reduce that over the years. But so far, Huawei is one of the few third-party manufacturers to to go on and create some sort of software that runs on their phones to take care of that stuff. And so I can see them using it for that, making things even faster there. Pattern recognition in photos in real time. What if you can say, focus on this log and stay focused on the log as I move the phone around?
Do you remember the Honor Magic?
Oh, yeah. The bezel-less phone we never saw in the US. I remember.
Yeah, but specifically the services component of the Honor Magic was, and this, of course, was a Huawei phone because Honor is Huawei.
Correct.
But they had this services component in China where it was basically spying on everything you did all the time, and then through some kind of AI technology, starting to try to adapt and suggest activities and things to do and to anticipate your needs before you need them.
Well, like Google Assistant tries to do, like HTC claims to do with their Assistant.
Right.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure that's going to be a part of it. But my point is that's the marketing gimmick you're talking about here. Because that's going to take so little power on that phone in terms of machine learning, honestly. Mm. What's really going to be really helpful for with neural network embedded hardware is pattern matching and recognition in images and sounds. So being able to hear something and distinguish it clearly and figure out what's happening. Like being able to hold your phone like you do with, to recognize a song, but instead it'll be able to tell you, oh, you're in Hong Kong. And you're actually close to the ferry terminal in Kowloon.
That actually makes me think of one of the funny, not entirely reliable Pixel rumors I've been hearing, which is that it'll come with a sort of background Shazam functionality. Have you heard this one?
Yeah, and that's perfect. You know what? This is happening. How do you think your phone right now responds to OK Google in your pocket, or how Alexa responds to? There she goes. She's going to chime up. And how does all that work? How does hey, there you go. Did you hear my phone just now? How does that work when you say hello Siri on you? That's always, the mic is always on. It's always listening. But now imagine that you can optimize that to listen and recognize not just your voice, but actually like, oh, you're in this location.
But the thing is, the thing that concerns me about that and background Shazam is that
it's scary. It's creepy.
It's creepy. It's super creepy. The privacy implications are huge.
But Google is always being super creepy. I mean, when you...
The battery life implications are huge.
Well, that's why they have these dedicated processors. That's what they do. They run in the background all the time, very low power, very optimized. It's hardware. It's just...
Right,
it's
but the reason the battery life impact is not that huge right now is because you don't say OK Google very often during the day. You're not waking up the whole phone very often. So you only have the OK Google listener alive. But if the phone is now listening for things that require more in-depth processing very frequently, like constantly identifying your location, or every time there's a new song in the Starbucks, it has to identify it. That starts kicking on the processor over and over again. And there's going to be a significant impact.
Sascha. It's not going to kick in the processor. It's all going to happen in the coprocessors. Remember when Motorola launched one of the X phones recently? Not like the last X that they did before they did the Z. That had a dedicated coprocessor. Remember, we were like, what kind of processor is this? It had a Qualcomm dual core, and then it had this other coprocessor in it that did all of this, constant working in the background for all of the motion sensing that the Moto X did. Imagine that put on steroids and, 2017 version. It's basically, you could run a Cortex M3 full time on one of those phones all the time and not even hit the battery life more than 1%. So,
right, but that is the processor that is determining whether music is being played.
No, I'm talking about
identifying the music.
Now, imagine that processor now gains a lot more oomph and horsepower. That's what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. With the Bionic, that's what we're talking about. The Kirin 960. That's what they're talking about when they talk about these machine learning, neural network, AI-based chips. There's an entire part of the chip that it doesn't wake up any of the 8 cores ever. That's just running and able to do this stuff in real time all the time. On the device, without a network connection, without waking up the GPS, nothing. right? And remember, waking up the GPS nowadays, our phones pretty much have the GPS awake all the time. And it's been optimized to death. It's amazing. LTE is on all the time. Like, so many of the things we were worried about power consumption. Remember when the first LTE phone came out, the HTC, what was it? Do you remember?
Thunderbolt.
Thank you. The Thunderbolt. Like, you turn LTE on and you could literally see the battery gauge in front of your very eye just decrease.
I believe it had 2.5 hours of live LTE usage.
Yeah. And look at where we are now. Yeah. I mean, like, our phones are miracles. And I think this is what these guys are talking about here. They're talking about, you know, these always-on processors that are very, very low power and do very specific tasks.
Well, hopefully we'll hear more about that and not about how blue and green their phones are.
Yeah, I hope so. But honestly, I don't think those Pixels are going to be the poster children for these. I think the iPhone 10 is going to be one of them. And I think that new Mate 10, and I think that's why the Mate 10, it's not going to be successful necessarily, or maybe not even sold in North America, at least no more than the Mate 9, which was a great phone, but it was sold in the US, but really didn't make a footprint of any kind. I think none of that's going to change right away. But what the takeaway will be is that Huawei is at the forefront on their processors, like Apple, at doing this. And we've heard Qualcomm doing that on their next generation, but the 835 currently doesn't really have that.
No, but I think, it is going to be very interesting to see what comes with the 845. And of course, we anticipate hearing the 845 details at CES.
Yeah. And then there's a rumor of the 836, which is kind of an update on the 835.
Okay.
We'll see if that happens.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens. I'm considering that to be a low probability rumor now. I think that was something that was, I think that was one of those games of telephone that got played out, so to speak.
And so since we're talking about the Mate 10, quickly, there were some rumors in the last couple of days with a leaked photo of what looks like what we very much expected, almost a full front screen, which would be a first for Huawei. And that would be awesome. And dual cameras in the back that look pretty massive, a continuation of this great Leica stuff that they've definitely they pioneered it with the Mate 9, sorry, not the Mate 9, the P9, and then the Mate 9 last year, brought the camera system that we saw in the P10 to light. So I think the Mate 10 is going to bring to light what we're going to see on the P11. And the P11 is going to make that more mainstream.
No, I mean,
in terms of
the unexpected thing that jumped out at me from those supposed leaked photos was, of course, that stripy design on the back.
Well, remember that Huawei made one of the best Nexus phones of all time, the 6P.
Right.
So, they're maybe capitalizing on that design, going like, hey, we're seeing that this is a trend, that Pixel has it, and the new Pixel has an even more defined band. So maybe we should kind of steal this design, go with it, because in the same way as the 6P design, it, in a way, evolved into the Pixel design, and I think that the Pixel 2 renders we're seeing, to me, look like a narrower band, so a bit more like the 6P was. Had that narrower band at the top. I mean, phones can only really look one way, and I think this is why Samsung has done such a good job with the S8 this year, is that it's immediately noticeable and recognizable that it's a Samsung S8 or Note 8. And kudos to them for finding their design language. And, Apple, a lot of people are bitching about the notch, and I get it. It's kind of an eyesore, but guess what? It's pattern recognition in our brains.
Eyesore.
Absolutely. People are going to immediately know this is what it is. It's an iPhone. And because they need something, because until now, the iPhone has been that thing with a small screen, two big top bottom bars, and a big home button at the bottom, right? So, yeah. So before we get into the next big topic, which I think is going to be a discussion on T-Mobile and Sprint, and maybe 600 megahertz on T-Mobile, let's quickly mention that the ZTE, there's rumors of a ZTE folding phone, and all I could remember is the Echo from Kyocera. Do you remember that phone?
David Blaine.
David Blaine, that's right. So what do you think? I mean, folding, to me, it just looks like a folding form factor. Like, it doesn't have an actual screen that folds, right?
Yeah,
it's two screens. So to me, that's why I say Kyocera Echo for 2017,
I agree, and I'm really nervous about this, because
I hope they do it right this time, because the Echo was a massive disaster.
people do not want to, people don't want to use a phone with a bezel in the middle of its effective screen. And what Kyocera ran into is that nobody's willing to create an ecosystem for one device by a non-top 5 vendor.
Of course.
And maybe ZTE is, I mean, depending on which list you look at, ZTE is a top 5 vendor in some places, but I don't think that they're going to be able to drive their own ecosystem here. So I'm really concerned about them doing this radical form factor in a way that's going to require exclusive software to make it work well.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens. I'm excited. I like the idea, especially if it's bezel-less, two bezel-less screens next to each other. It could be fun. ZTE's done some cool stuff. I don't expect this to be a big seller, but I'm intrigued. And I like being intrigued. I need some excitement in life. Phones are just all the same and they're kind of boring.
And ZTE, so I have been following ZTE and Huawei both for, 7 years now. And I remember when I first went to visit them in like 2011 and getting the difference in the feel between the two companies. And it's played out even to this day because Huawei was this very big, very orderly, very thoughtful, very stepwise company where they were like, we have the whole next 18 months planned out in 18 different units, one a month, and here's our stair steps, and here's the individual innovation we are adding to each product, and take a nice walk around our meditation pool. And ZTE was and still is this much kind of scrappier company willing to throw a Hail Mary. And they're willing to do some wacky things just to see if they stick to the wall. And years.
Well, they are to Samsung what LG. Oh, there are two. You get it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. They're the LG to Huawei.
ZTE
Samsung.
Is to Huawei what LG is to Samsung.
Right. And they tried it with the crowdsourced phone that so far has not happened. You remember that whole process?
Yeah, I do remember that.
The ZTE Hawkeye, I think it was.
God, what a disaster that was.
Yeah, so that was a mess. But this is going to be another one of their great. Or do you remember their smart projector? They had these Android-powered projectors for a couple of years. It's all, I love them because they have these big ideas and they're willing to go in on a big idea that nobody else has. So yeah, sure, bring the dual screen phone.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. I'm happy to see new form factors. Is basically what I'm saying at this point. Bring them on, go nuts. And I think they're not. It's not going to be successful. Whatever, I don't care. It's got to start somewhere. And we know that the first real folding phone is going to be a Samsung phone. We know that, like folding screen. Or plastic OLED that can be repeatedly bent without any major damage. I think that's going to be pretty cool, of course. And remember, a few years back, I think when the 808 Nokia was launched last year, that Mobile Congress was at the old Fira in Barcelona, when they showed this Nokia prototype that was bendable in every way. Like the whole thing was like this blob, and you could like twist it and bend it. And it had sensors that detected that you twisted and bent it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, Kyocera had that as a concept for like 3 years.
We haven't seen that yet, but we know that's kind of where we're going. And I've been saying for a while now that, the future phone will be basically all covered in sensors. Like every external surface will be a sensor, whether it's touch or light, and light obviously would mean photography potentially, or able to emit sound, receive sound, display light. So like this, a display would be emit light, like a display. Like you could potentially have, like, the holy grail would be every tiny little pixels all over the phone, entire surface of the phone, which each of them is a microphone, a speaker, a light emitter, a light receiver, a radio antenna for in and out data, and a solar cell, and a touch sensor, and a piezo pressure sensor, all in one.
But so coming back to 2017, I think the point of this ZTE phone is really that ZTE makes most of their money in the US on, as we said, those attractive, relatively low-end phablets. And this is just to say that we are not a company that just makes cheap phablets. We do innovate. We have big ideas. now you can buy one of our phablets with the knowledge that it at least comes from a company that has big ideas.
Yeah, kind of like LG. Look, we're a company that innovates and does great new things. Look at this modular phone, the G5. That sucks.
That said, I love, my wife has a G6. We love the wide.
The G6 is amazing.
Yeah, we love the wide angle camera. The wide angle camera, especially in like family or party photo situations, is the best thing ever.
It's funny because so many people, I'm on your camp, I feel that the wide angle is the more important of the two cameras if you're going to have two cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people don't agree with that. And speaking of which, I just want to, as an aside, say that I was on All About Android last week, on the Twit Network, the video podcast, the live video podcast with Jason, Flo, and Ron. And I mentioned that a package was coming from Google. Obviously, I can tell you what it is now. It is the Moto X4 Android One. And,
yeah.
And I can't tell you more than that. I can just tell you that I have it. And so expect me to talk about that soon. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because it has a dual camera system where one of the cameras is a wide angle versus, like the Moto Z2 Force, which has a monochrome and color. So it's the first non-LG phone I've ever played with that has a wide angle and a regular angle, which is interesting.
Yeah, and it's I think it's $399 on Google Fi, right? So that's
correct.
That is a really sweet mid-range for Google Fi.
As I said, I can't talk too much about it, but stay tuned. When the embargo lifts, I'll tell you more. But I can tell you I have it, and it's good times.
Okay.
So let's talk about T-Mobile and Sprint because we have to wrap it up in about 10 minutes, and I want to kind of get your feel for this because you are one of the few mobile tech journalists out there that really has a good understanding of U.S. The U.S. carrier, world, and I do too. But I think you're more. You guys do extensive testings on the road every year of network performance and all that good stuff. So I'm very, I'm a long time T-Mobile customer, a long time believer, and very happy. Obviously, in the last 5 years, as John Ledger at the helm. I'm very, very upset at the potential of this merger with Sprint. And I want to know your take, and I also want us to talk briefly about the 600 megahertz band because the V30, by the way, is going on sale on the 5th of October. Mm-hmm. If you want to pick up a V30, you finally can. It's the first phone in the US that supports 600 megahertz for T-Mobile. So what's your take on the Sprint T-Mobile thing and in general on T-Mobile's expansion? Because they've grown their LTE network like holy crap balls in the last 2 years.
So T-Mobile has done brilliantly over the past 2 years. We actually have an animation on our website showing showing their growth, both in terms of their official coverage map, but also in terms of our annual drive testing. So our real, actual live testing of it. And anyone who thinks that T-Mobile is just a city carrier, that's a mindset from 2014. They are much better than they used to be in that way. And a lot of that is down to Neville Ray, their CTO, is a amazing ninja when it comes to building networks. And he kind of always has been. He is just terrific at that with the resources that he has. And T-Mobile has been getting resources recently. Now, what's happening with Sprint is that Masa Son, the chairman of SoftBank, who owns Sprint, is dissatisfied with his purchase and he's dissatisfied with its performance. And I believe he would like to unload it. And
I guess he never traveled to the US before he bought that.
No, he just thought he could turn it around. Like he thought it was undervalued and he could turn it around.
How long has Sprint been a mess? 10 years
Sprint
now?
has been a mess since it got sucked into the Nextel merger vortex in like 2005.
That's pretty much
And then
accurate.
after that, they made a really expensive bet on the wrong 4G technology.
WiMAX,
Yes.
Oh God.
And so they were just recovering from the Nextel thing, and they make this really expensive bet on WiMAX, which was a total failure and the wrong way to go, which put them 2 years behind on LTE. And it's just been, one hit after another. And Marcelo Clar has done a decent job kind of stabilizing the ship, but he stabilized the ship and there was so much drama that they're significantly behind the other competitors, including T-Mobile, who was not doing well 5 years ago, but John Ledger put a powerboat motor on that rowboat.
Yeah, and wow is all I have to say as a T-Mobile customer. Yeah. I mean, there's many reasons I stuck with T-Mobile for as long as I did. Primarily because they were the only carrier that let me bring my own device without making a fuss back in the day. And I used to buy unlocked phones all the time. And even though they didn't have for a long time 3G and then for a long time 4G or LTE, etc., it was just delightful to get treated like a normal human when I brought my own phones in. And it was delightful to get a slightly cheaper price. And it was delightful to have a fast network when it was working, when I had coverage. Now I can say I have coverage on top of that. And of course, on top of that, I don't have a contract. And on top of that, I don't know. There's so many good things. International roaming is my favorite feature, honestly, of being a
the deal with this merger. The deal with this merger is that Masa Son, to some extent, wants to unload Sprint. And T-Mobile would not mind having 40 million more customers so that they can instantaneously be competing with Verizon and AT&T at scale, and Sprint's giant cache of 2.6 gigahertz spectrum, which is really, really good for 5G.
Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, it's such a nightmare to merge these two in terms of customer service and in terms of working handsets. Like, can you imagine if you're a Sprint customer and all of a sudden, having to support legacy stuff like Metro PCS, I think was manageable, and they did a decent job as switching them over from CDMA to LTE and GSM, right? But Sprint, oof.
Yeah, I mean,
Sprint is the carrier that still requires you to call in to change service between phones, even though they have SIM cards.
Basically.
By the way, why is that? I don't get it. I can take a SIM from a Verizon phone, put it on another Verizon phone, and the CDMA just works.
Some of Sprint's systems are really old. Sprint has not upgraded some of those systems, and a lot of Sprint's problem, and this is where T-Mobile would get stuck. It isn't about merging the networks or the handsets. Technically, it's about merging things like billing systems. The billing systems, the subscriber identification systems, the cores that transmit messages, that sort of stuff is where carriers really get stuck in the weeds. Customer service gets dragged down, mistakes get made, things get confusing, and you end up with 2 years worth of lost time and lost energy as they try to figure out how to merge this stuff. Never mind.
I hope they don't.
The massive job losses that would happen with the supposedly redundant staff and with the redundant third-party retail outlets. It wouldn't just be T-Mobile and Sprint employees who are getting laid off. It's all of these third-party store owners where T-Mobile and Sprint will decide, or a merged T-Mobile and Sprint would decide, oh, you know what? There's a T-Mobile independent store and a Sprint independent store on the same block. You guys were just dropping you. So massive job losses, getting lost in the weeds, merging these billing services, and then we end up with only 3 major nationwide competitors. And if you want to see,
and that's the biggest problem.
And if you want to see what happens there, go look at Canada.
Oh. Yeah, exactly. Look, you're right. That's my biggest fear. Honestly, the stores being on the same block doesn't matter. They still have Metro PCS and T-Mobile stores on the same block in San Francisco all over the place, and they coexist just fine. So I don't think that's a problem. But you're right. I think there'd be layoffs and all that. I think the biggest issue to me is some of the technical challenges and some of the it's the reducing the competitive landscape of carriers in the US. We need more carriers, not less.
Yes. And if you look at, there are other companies that could potentially buy Sprint. They just don't feel like doing it. And nobody is really stepping up and saying we're going to build another nationwide cell phone network. Other companies that seem to be trying to enter the market, like say Comcast Xfinity, are generally doing it in an MVNO model, or Google Fi are doing it in an MVNO model. And the way MVNOs work is the four carriers who manage the national networks are not about to sign an MVNO contract that would threaten their core businesses. They're not about to create real competitors that way.
True. Besides, if you want a Sprint and T-Mobile merger right now, just get Project Fi.
Yeah, I mean, if you want the combined service.
That's the best of both worlds.
Totally.
Exactly.
You get Sprint, right? T-Mobile, and you get US Cellular out in the sticks.
And you get world international roaming out in the other sticks.
Exactly. So you can get that experience if you want it without having, for people who are listening who are not familiar with the beauty and the grandeur that is our northern neighbor, the situation in Canada is that you have three major carriers, and they have generally very good networks, but the prices are very high and they never have price wars.
Yeah. And it's kind of killing everything because, and there's been a few kind of like independent, scrappy players coming in, like Wind and what was the other one? Videotron and stuff, but they just haven't made a dent, or they've been absorbed.
Well, they generally operate on a smaller scale because it turns out it is extremely difficult to build a giant continent-wide
it's insane.
Cellular network.
I mean, the cost is like billions upon billions of dollars. I mean, that's the reality of it. But we want competition. So, vote against this. If you're a Sprint customer, you know what to do. You need to switch over to T-Mobile today. I mean, that's clearly obvious, right? Like, if you are still a Sprint customer right now, guys, seriously, what is wrong with you? I don't know how you live and survive in this cellular world. I'm of course joking slightly because I'm sure that in some parts of the world, Sprint has better service than T-Mobile. And sure, it's possible.
They do, in fact, in a lot of the Midwest.
There you go. So anyway, you're against this merger. I'm against this merger. I hope that they come to their senses, and I hope that John Ledger is not too greedy because he's a great guy. I know him personally. Not very well, but I've met him and we've talked. And he wished me happy birthday at CES. You were there. You remember. So, I count that as kind of pretty tight, Just kidding.
No, John.
But anyway, the point.
John Ledger is a great guy. He's a great guy, but ultimately he's a businessman and a CEO. And he
has shareholders.
He's not running Uncarrier because he thinks he actually is Batman. He's running Uncarrier because it's a successful business strategy. And if there was less competition, if there was no need to run Uncarrier, then Uncarrier might go away.
Yeah, exactly. And so, let's see what happens. But also the FCC is in there. Of course, the current FCC is probably going to be saying yes to any merger of any kind because they're bitches. Yes, I mean that. Seriously, like, what is wrong with you, FCC, right now? Are you out of your freaking mind? That could be a random. How do you feel about the FCC right now? I mean, seriously.
The FCC, it's a Republican FCC. This is what happens if if the country votes for a Republican government, they get an FCC which is focused on allowing lots of mergers and not regulating, and that is that particular ideology. Basically, this is elections have consequences. This is the consequence of this election.
Yeah, I can think of even more dire consequences, but yeah, that's one of them. And so we'll see how it goes. But let's talk quickly. We have can we spend just 1 minute because we need to wrap it up? But I'm really curious about 600 megahertz. What's your take on that? Obviously, a single phone. Probably by next year, we'll have most Android phones from T-Mobile that they sell on that network capable of these bands, compatible with these bands. It doesn't look that the iPhone's going to get that compatibility potentially until the next generation iPhone. So what's your take? Do people need to worry about this? Should they buy a V30 because of 600 megahertz?
They should only buy a V30 if they are in a rural area, which T-Mobile is promising to cover soon. This is going to be primarily for filling in the final gaps in T-Mobile's coverage in areas where they don't have 700 megahertz licenses. And
got it.
Over the next year, we're going to see those gaps fill in, but it isn't going to hugely affect the coverage for people who are in areas that already have what T-Mobile calls extended range LTE, or 700 megahertz. In those areas, it'll just be a capacity supplement. It'll prevent the network from slowing down.
So it's not critical yet. You could wait till next year to have a phone with 600 megahertz.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And T-Mobile's going to make a big deal when they enter new metro areas and new rural areas with 600 megahertz. So if you're in one of these areas, you're going to hear when T-Mobile is coming to town.
You will, because John will come in person on his little, sitting on the back of a convertible with a float and a bunch of magenta flags. It'll be awesome.
Exactly.
Go John. Go John. Yeah, right. Sascha, you've been awesome. Thanks for being on. Tell us about yourself. Where can people find you on Twitter, on whatever your favorite media is, of course, on PCMag? Tell us.
So I am, of course, the head of the mobile folks at PCMag. So you can find a lot of my stuff at PCMag.com pretty much daily. But I am also a heavy Twitter user. And my Twitter is at Sascha Segan, which is my name, SASCHASEGAN. That's probably the best way, other than PCMag.com, to interact with me. Of course, you'll also find me on PCMag's Facebook shows. I'm the host of One Cool Thing, which is every weekday Eastern, 10 a.m. On PCMag's Facebook page, and also have dialed in our mobile phone show at 3 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays at PCMag's Facebook page.
There you go, guys. So, yeah, read Sascha. Sascha and I have known each other for a long time. We've been in the business of reporting about mobile tech for a really long time. We're like old, cranky, jaded, but I think we thankfully remember the past, and we can hopefully teach you some lessons about what we learned in the past so that you know what the right choices are to make. You know where to find me. I'm at Tankerl on Twitter. That's Tankerl without the vowels, like the comic book character TNKGRL. MobileTechPodcast.com is the URL for this podcast. Please share it with your friends. This is where they can find the RSS feed to subscribe to this podcast. We can be found as Mobile Tech Podcast, 3 words, on iTunes and on Pocket Casts and other your other favorite podcast network apps, etc. And you check out my YouTube channel. I do a lot of unboxings of the devices I get. I do live video unboxings just for fun, really. YouTube.com/Miriam Jouar, my full name. And that's how you can find me. Stay tuned for next week. It is going to be a great podcast because we'll have a lot of Pixel talk. The Pixel will be behind us. We will know what to expect. We will know what is going on, and we will tell you everything we know. We being me and my guests, which I will not share with you yet. All right, guys and gals and people and folks, stay tuned for next week, and that's it. That's a wrap. Thanks again, Sascha.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.